science has denied all of these accusations. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I don't know why.
I really want to set you free, but I really want to let you be. And a part of me wished I could set myself aside, just let you take the ride, just chalk the rest up to destiny. I could let you believe that the only restraints in life are the size of your dreams. Let you believe each kid grows up with the world at their feet. When I know too well it's open season, I know they're taking stock and raising stocks and raising stock. And I'm simply not here to sit and watch as you learn the lesson all cogs are taught. Keep your head down and keep to task and just keep on blocking the rest of it all out. Just keep on with the rest of the herd of a million adjacent oblivious workers. The forest unseen for the trees, and the trees unseen for the fallout. Now what's more damning, baby, the truth or the ignorance? Fuck it, I honestly wonder if I see the answer so well. Baby, believe me well, I know it's scary, I scare myself. If I could find a way out of my head, I would run like hell. I would ditch this body politic, mindless occupant somewhere far from the dismal abyss. In the tranquil crystalline bliss of the beach, I could rest with the rest of the shells. And if anyone asks I'm anywhere else, if I'm really needed, just light the candle, then read the book, and then ring the bell. Oh, my untarnished heart, my little perfect soul, this world will melt your mercy down so they can sell its gold. This world will take your worth and then demand 1,000-fold. It's full of greedy pigs who'll eat you out of house and home. They'll strip your bank account and sweep you somewhere down the road, and then return to eat your tent and shitty bike you rode. Your bottled water, only shoes and coat and broken phone. Then smiling in your face, they'll tell you that the shelter's closed.
Just making sure that the clips are ready to be played. They were already in. Yeah, did that a few hours ago.
When you are not with where majority
Yeah, I was
of
looking for
Americans
something in
are,
regards to today, so that would be
then, you know, that is extreme. That is an extreme way of thinking.
Hoped you would never find out, knew that you had to know. Pulling what's left of my mind out, trying to tell you so. I tried to block the light out, knew you could feel its glow. I've been here holding my hands out, trying to keep you close. Trying to keep you close. Oh, my untarnished heart, my little perfect soul. This world will melt your mercy down so they can sell its gold. This world will take your worth, then demand 1,000-fold. I tried to block the light just so I could keep you close. Last stand, and I came to deliver. Been called a Clinton operative, a Russian, and a grifter. By libs, a Washington student debt, proud to be an intern, sucking up to pigs who get a tax cut in the midterms. You cut the ties but never heal the wrist burns. Capitalist shackles wrap and penetrate like ringworms around the necks of those whose deaths will not affect the king's purse or the coffers of the company the king serves, who manufacture mandated tinctures. Their safety data hanging from a fixture, half a mile skyward, just dangling from the rafters. My grift is sobbing till I'm cackling with laughter. I guess I would have made a decent actor. I'd be great at crying on command until they cut plus 40 minutes after. When the director waves a hand, it ain't a rap, it's now a legal matter. Honey, my grift is weeping on a mic until I'm hacking up airstrike verses like it's bombs away and batter up. Swinging on these bigots, they keep killing us to fatten up. Kill the switch, eat the rich, I think they're finally fat enough. Grab your knife and fork, the world is yours, just say you've had enough. And if you're comfy, you could go ahead and laugh it up. Tell me how the most important vote I'll ever cast is like the choosing of a bus, in that it might not take you anywhere you want, but no one can deny the fact the bus is now no longer where it was. And that's the kind of progress we should celebrate and trust. Spoken like a kid who never took a bus. Spoken like a piece of shit that used some cash to mask his stink and truly thinks he's one of us. Spoken like a terminally unserious person who equates our cries for rights to mixed up orders from a server. It paints a privileged picture of what you would label urgent if the worst thing you've experienced in life has been the time your waiter accidentally brought a tray of gold flake scallop when you clearly ordered gold flake urchin. And now you're storming out the restaurant and hopping in a Tesla. You got 80 pounds of Tony Fauci merchant.
Rewind 2 chains won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride. Rewind 2 chains won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride.
Best to place your bets on weaponizing the identity of every limp progressive claiming grassroots integrity. Policy is a slippery slope for all of its complexity, so flex your brave resistance with this Ilhan Omar NFT. Numbered 1 of 723. Each depicts her valiantly championing a bill before she lays it at a donor's feet. And she can throw her hands up in the air with AOC and say if only Nina Turner could have voted present too, that's why we need another seat. We need some more progressives we elect to only tweet, who live to serve humana and their label of elective slapped on every patient's gravest needs. And every station plays the theme that medical professionals agree on the effectiveness and safety of injections authorized for this emergency. And in purely unrelated news, the profits of the ones who manufacture vaccines just increased by nearly 36 billion with a fucking B. Sometimes it feels like we're the only ones that see. Sometimes it feels like all of us are lost at sea. And every time we think we see an island on the tip of the horizon, it turns out to be another measure making sure we're kept within the watchful eye of murderous authority. And so I guess my grift is crying for the future they denied us, where the people who would buy us are a mockable minority. And we are more than genomes under warranty. And we are more than serfs in constant quarantine. If I had a single breath left, I'd let the chorus scream. I'd announce our leaders claiming none for all and more for me. None for all and more for me. None for all and more for me. None for all and more for me.
Rewind 2 chains won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride. Rewind 2 chains won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride. I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride. I thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry.
Just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Who are these people?
It's us. We're these people.
I love that intro. I love that intro so much.
I'm here with a different co-host this time, Oz LaFave.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me on.
Friend of the show, DJ Joe Nice. How are you, friend?
What's good? And you hear Nick say this all the time. The United States is the most propagandized country in the world.
We are so fucked, you guys. Again, I'm sorry for being cynical, but seriously,
No.
we're fucked. We are
Right.
fucked. We are well and truly fucking fucked.
Just appreciate all the work that you do and the platforms that you all are providing.
Hey, doing good. How are you guys doing?
I think as independent media, we have a responsibility to be, we don't hide our bias, obviously, but we must stay true to the facts.
What's up, Ian?
Cheers and salutations. Smoke 'em if you got them.
But I am here with a man that I've been waiting to talk to for the last couple of years, Nico House.
As an educator, what I would suggest is that, first of all, podcasts like these are made.
So you need to be an example for the people and for the future, knowing that your words can actually change the future.
What do you feel? What would Kwame Ture feel we would have to do?
Well, politics is every day of every minute. You have to be aware of what's going on. Not voting on one day, so the vote has never meant anything. So I'm not a Democrat.
See, I would call that guy the Black Obama.
No. The issues that we talk about, listen to us.
As always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
INN News.
What?
Oh, you changed it.
Huh? Is INN news now?
How much did you pay Trump to say that?
Only a little bit, just slightly. They gave me a lot of money, so much money. Anyway, welcome to INN News, everybody.
Yeah.
You got to listen to the talented Jesse Jett before we went live. That's always a treat. But now we're here. It's me, Reef Breland, with my co-host, Collin Radix-Carter, a.k.a. Care Bear. Care Bear, how are you?
Hello.
You doing right?
I'm good.
Okay.
I always have to go back to work, but yeah, other than that, pretty good.
Yeah,
And you?
I forgot you got, the summer's almost over. You got to go back to school,
Mm-hmm.
So,
In a couple of weeks, yeah, I officially have to go back. I probably have to start going back like a light, soft re-entry, like toward the end of next week.
You've been back
Definitely
in
the
gym,
following week.
training for children wrangling, and just like
Hopefully, I
on the
won't have to do that.
treadmill, like, oh God, I got him.
Hopefully, I won't have to do that this year. So we'll see, though. But
Yeah.
hoping that it won't be as dramatic in that regard
Well,
as it was this past year.
speaking of drama,
But yeah,
bunch of stuff happening in the world. If we want to talk about it, you want to get into it?
in a lot of ways, in a big way, and I think it relates to a lot's been happening here. And surprise, not surprising. Actually, if you want to share the first slide,
Yeah.
give you
Oh,
an idea
also,
of what we're going to
before
talk
we do
about.
that,
Oh, what?
if you look right down here, scrolling across that bottom thing, there's now members there. So if you've supported us by being a YouTube member, you'll see your name scrolling across the chat. So we appreciate you. And I gotta add Patreon still. But we'll get there. But yeah, new things, new stuff. So appreciate you.
So
Thank you.
we're still thinking of things that we can actually do as a thank you for members who regularly support us financially. So yeah, we're still talking about that. Actually, funny enough, like I saw, just as an aside, I saw somebody and I forgot their name escaped me. But a recommendation, I wouldn't say a recommendation, like our community name should be like the In Crowd.
Sure.
I actually kind of like that. The
like
In
that.
Crowd. Gives something a little bit kind of exclusive in a way, but kind of like that. But yeah, so as we say, you don't have to give us money. Your presence, and we know there, I wouldn't say better, but we know there are more popular channels that are on right now. But the fact that you guys are here with us, we definitely appreciate. I'm sure a lot of you will be coming in later on. But all the same, if you feel to give, please do, either through Super Chat. We need to push, I think, Patreon, I guess, more, because we do have that. We don't promote that nearly as much as we
We
should.
have a few
But
of them. I need to add them to the thing, but it's there.
yeah,
If you go
so
to
we
the
should
Indie
definitely
News,
should add them to the ticker. But
Indie News Network below us, you can support us there.
Yeah, but
so
as
I'll
we
make
say,
sure, like Desert Mantis is a patron supporter, and I'll make sure to add you in some way or form to the list. But yeah.
But yeah, as we say, don't feel compelled to give. If you do give, make sure you take care of yourselves.
Yeah.
Take care of your families. Take care of your communities first. But any money you have after you're taking care of all of that, if you want to give to us, so that
we appreciate it.
we're able to grow. We actually been talking about, in what ways we like to grow earlier today. We will appreciate it, and we are thankful for it. So, but that aside, we want to also thank you guys. You guys have been subbing away like the last month or so. Been sharing us, and like a lot of our clips we've done within the last month have been doing fairly well for us. So we definitely appreciate you guys watching, sharing, listening, commenting, doing all the things to help us in the algorithm, because YouTube doesn't like us at all. So that means we're doing a good thing. But yeah, so definitely continue doing that, because the only way I think we've been getting quality subs is through word of mouth. So we definitely have appreciated you guys' support in helping us grow. So you ready to get started?
I think so. I think I've just about
on the docket tonight.
Evened our sound out too, so that's good. While we've been talking. Right. So yeah, we got some stories. You wanted to talk about this, right?
Well, this, I think, especially in live today, this honestly, this should be more of a trending topic than it is, and it isn't, but we know why it isn't. But it's very important, and I think we definitely should be talking about this a lot more than I think it's getting recognized, definitely in mainstream media, and I think even in independent media as well, other than like maybe a few people. But I want to talk about Niger, or Niger, in the French pronunciation. It's not. Do not
The
pronounce
other way.
it with the other way. That is
hard
not
R.
how you say it. The hard R.
I only ever
say
heard it pronounced Niger, which is, well, what do I know?
Yeah, it's either or, but I think more correct would be Niger, since
I refuse to use the oppressor's language here, Collin.
Well, fortunately, most people at this point know it by that. You can blame the Berlin Conference for that.
Yeah,
we actually have a video on that we talked about.
Fucking French.
Um,
Fucking frogs. God damn it.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, thank you, Desmond Mandis. Glad that you're here to watch
Parlez-vous
this.
français? Oui.
Here for this. So, appreciate you watching. You know, because as I said, this is a very important topic, and I think it definitely relates to other stories that have been trending on Twitter while I was on vacation over the weekend. That I do want to make that connection to. I think we can definitely. And we talked about it a little bit before we went live, so I think we'll definitely bring up a lot of those talking points again. I brought this story. I've kind of held on to this for the last couple of weeks, but especially given, UPS striking and a lot of other organizations in the midst of striking or preparing to, this is a local story for me. This is based in DC, but a sandwich shop, which is not too far from my house, is actually pushing for a living wage.
Nice.
So yeah, which I think is very significant because more often than not, we're asking for, about the minimum wage, and these employees are asking for a living wage. So I think that's very significant given that I live in DC and we have our minimum wage is 17 as of a couple of weeks ago. But for these employees, think even that is not enough. And living here, I definitely do agree. So we will talk about that as well. And then what do you have?
Well, I have a piece put up by Counterpunch summarizing a documentary that I suggest people watching from the Friendly Geordies about what's been happening in Papua New Guinea and how us and other major powers have been funding citizen massacres there. So we'll get into that terrible story and another article from Caitlin Johnstone about the culture wars and how you shouldn't be paying attention to it. But, that's what I brought. So, yeah. You ready? I'm ready.
Ready. Yeah. This story is going to be, of my two, the longer of the two. So, we're going to do... So here's how we're going to do it. And shout out to Ben Norton, who I'm going to use as far as his YouTube clip and the article that he wrote regarding this issue in Niger. However, I will admit I'm not a fan of the article and the way he wrote it, so I'm not going to read all of it. Plus, if I read all of it, this would be an hour segment. If you want to read it at your own time, there is the link in our description if you want to read the whole thing in full. But in the video, and a nice afterthought, I probably should have clipped the video instead of doing the article, but I think either way would be better. Probably would be short this way. So Ben is going to give a very brief overview of what's been happening in Niger. So, and then as I said, the article I'm going to be using comes from Scheerpost and Popular Resistance, where he wrote, U.S. and France threaten intervention in resource-rich Niger. So we're going to take a few minutes. He's going to give a little overview of what's happening in Niger. We'll go into it a little bit more in depth, and I'm sure you guys will have some comments, and I'm sure you do too. We'll talk about a little bit more. So yeah, if you want to play the clip.
Yep, working on it. Hold on. Full screen. Here. Play.
The United States and France are threatening foreign intervention in West Africa, in particular in the country of Niger, where a pro-Western government was overthrown. This is a region of the world that is very rich in natural resources and is also very strategic for the United States and France. Of course, France colonized West Africa and still maintains many neo-colonial policies, which I'll be discussing today. But also, the United States has one of its largest and most important drone bases based in Niger. And Niger is one of the world's largest producers of uranium. And uranium is used for European energy, especially France, a country that has a lot of nuclear energy.
Especially since they stopped taking gas from other foreign powers.
Right.
As well, Niger is a major producer of gold. So the possibility of a foreign military intervention in Niger and potentially other West African nations is very seriously on the table. It is a threat that many countries in West Africa are taking seriously. And we have seen statements from neighboring countries of Niger that have similar governments, like in Burkina Faso and also in Mali, that have said that if there is a foreign intervention, they would consider this a declaration of war. The possibility of war breaking out in West Africa is very real. And as is pretty much always the case, Western powers are the ones fueling the fire of this conflict and threatening war. Let's not forget that this is a region where there were very recent examples of Western military intervention. In 2013 and 2014, France led a military intervention in Mali, a neighbor of Niger. And in 2011, NATO, led by the United States with the support of France and Canada and other European nations, destroyed the central government of Libya that was led by the revolutionary leader Muammar Gaddafi. They killed Gaddafi, and still today, a decade later, Libya has no central government. It's been in a state of civil war, and now there's a possibility of the Western powers expanding that conflict to the west and to the south, to the Sahel region. So today we're going to talk about what's going on in Niger, also in Burkina Faso and Mali and Guinea, and the threats of Western military intervention. Now, I will clarify at the beginning here, I am definitely not an Africa expert. I would never claim to be an Africa expert, but I've done a lot of research on these events, and I want to talk about the geopolitical and economic implications and how this is part of a larger international campaign by the United States and by European colonial powers to reassert a kind of neo-colonial policy politically and economically, in particular on resource-rich countries in the global south. Africa is an extremely resource-rich continent, and the Western powers have relied on exploiting its mineral wealth and exploiting the labor of African workers in order to get rich and in order to maintain their riches and their inequality. Almost all of West Africa was colonized by France, which committed brutal war crimes and atrocities. It committed genocide. It used concentration camps, the same kind of policies that the Nazis also used, the French Empire used in Africa. And today we see that many of these nationalist military leaders in countries like Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali are invoking the historical legacy of the anti-colonial movements and even revolutionary socialist movements like Thomas Sankara's movement that he led, the revolution he led in Burkina Faso in the 1980s. And the French government is really trying to reimpose its neo-colonial control over these former colonial territories.
Okay. So he just basically gave an overview of what's going on. So now what we're going to do is go into the article where he extends a lot of what he said a little bit more. Like I said, I'm not pulling everything because it's a long article. I actually had pulled half of it, and I feel it's still a lot. But there's enough information here that you get the gist as to why the issue in Niger is problematic, and I believe in a lot of ways how it's going to be more of a problem, for us down the road, probably within the next few months. By the way, this is going especially with what happened today. So Ben writes, the leaders of the new government in Niger publicly warned that France is plotting military intervention. Paris is looking for ways and means to intervene militarily in Niger, the authorities said, saying that French officials met with the chief of staff of Niger's National Guard to attain the necessary political and military authorization, The Guardian reported. The British newspaper described Niger's toppled president, Bazoum, as an ally of Western powers. Oh.
There you go.
There we go. Along with Paris, the U.S. State Department is actively coordinating with Bazoum and plotting to put its ally back in power. To give supposed multilateral cover to their plans for intervention, the U.S. and France have been working closely with the Economic Community of Western African States, ECOWAS. Rutgers purported that ECOWAS and West African defense chiefs have drawn up a plan for military action if Niger's coup is not overturned. And here's a cartoon that you pulled from me from African Stream that basically, that's Macron telling ECOWAS, so basically the idea of using Black African
soldiers,
NATO puppets,
yeah,
to do their dirty work for them. So,
I like
but
the,
as
I like
we
the
see,
Napoleon outfit here.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. But as we're going to see later, few African countries are not going to have that. So the UK-based news outlet emphasized, given its uranium and oil riches and pivotal role in the war with Islamic rebels in the Sahel region, Niger has strategic significance for the United States, China, Europe, and Russia. ECOWAS imposed sanctions on Niger, and the country's southern neighbor, Nigeria, has begun establishing a de facto blockade.
Yep.
Because Nigeria is
owned
also
by
a puppet.
France and us, yeah.
Yeah. More us, if anything else. Niger previously received roughly 70% of its electricity from Nigeria, but the Nigerian government, which is closely allied with the West, has now cut off that power. Solidarity much? No? Foreign intervention may be easier said than done, however, because Niger's neighbors have come to its defense. The governments in Burkina Faso and Mali released a joint statement stating that any military intervention against Niger would be tantamount to a declaration of war against Burkina Faso and Mali. The West African nations warned that the disastrous consequences of a military intervention in Niger could destabilize the entire region, France 24 reported. Burkina Faso and Mali also condemned the illegal, illegitimate, and inhumane sanctions that Western governments have imposed against the people and authorities of Niger.
So essentially,
so
they're going...
Catch me outside, how about that?
Basically,
like,
yeah. And to give you more as proof of that, we're going to play a short clip. This is Ibrahim Traoré. He is now the transitional president of Burkina Faso. He led a military coup in the country and overthrew Jean-Henri Sandaogo last year. So he's gotten a lot of attention, at least on Twitter recently, especially, and we saw this picture when we talked about the Russia-Africa summit last week. So it's in French, but it's subtitled, so you can understand what he's saying, but listen to what he says.
On se sent en famille en ce sens que la Russie est une famille aussi pour l'Afrique. C'est une famille parce que nous avons la même histoire. La Russie a consenti d'énormes sacrifices pour libérer le monde du nazisme pendant la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Les peuples africains, nos grands-pères, ont été déportés de force aussi pour aider l'Europe à se débarrasser du nazisme. Nous partageons la même histoire en ce sens que nous sommes les peuples oubliés du monde. Qu'ils soient dans les livres d'histoire, dans les documentaires ou films, on tend donc à balayer le rôle prépondérant qu'a joué la Russie et de l'Afrique dans cette lutte contre le nazisme. Pour ce qui concerne le Burkina Faso, aujourd'hui nous sommes confrontés depuis plus de 8 ans à la forme de manifestation la plus barbare, la plus violente du néocolonialisme, de l'impérialisme. L'esclavage qu'on tend encore à nous imposer. Nos dévanciers nous ont bien appris une chose. L'esclave qui n'est pas capable d'assumer sa révolte ne mérite pas que l'on s'apitoie sur son sort. Nous ne nous apitoyons pas sur nos sorts, on ne demande pas que quelqu'un s'apitoie sur notre sort. Le peuple burkinabé a décidé de lutter contre le terrorisme en mesure de relancer son développement. Dans cette lutte, des vaillants peuples, des vaillantes populations se sont engagées à prendre les armes face au terrorisme, ceux que nous avons affectueusement appelés les VDP, des volontaires. Nous sommes surpris de voir les impérialistes traiter ces VDP de milices et de tout type. C'est décevant, parce qu'en Europe, lorsque des peuples prennent les armes pour défendre leur patrie, on les traite de patriotes. Mais là n'est pas le problème. Ce qui est le problème, c'est de voir des chefs d'État africains qui n'apportent rien à ces peuples qui se battent, mais qui chantent la même chose que les impérialistes en nous traitant de milices, en nous traitant donc d'hommes qui ne respectent pas les droits de l'homme. De quels droits de l'homme parle-t-on? Nous nous offusquons contre cela et c'est honteux. Il faut que nous, chefs d'État africains, nous arrêtons de nous comporter donc en marionnettes qui dansent à chaque fois que les impérialistes tirent sur les ficelles. Hier, le président Vladimir Poutine a annoncé donc l'envoi de céréales en Afrique. Nous sommes bien contents. Nous lui disons merci pour cela. Mais aussi, c'est un message passé à nous, chefs d'État africains, parce qu'au prochain forum, nous ne devrons pas venir ici sans avoir assuré, pour ceux qui ne connaissent pas la guerre, l'autosuffisance alimentaire de nos peuples. Nous devons prendre l'expérience de ceux qui ont pu déjà atteindre cela en Afrique, tisser de bonnes relations ici et tisser de meilleures relations avec la Fédération de Russie pour pouvoir assouvir les besoins de nos populations. Gloire à nos peuples, dignité à nos peuples, victoire à nos peuples. La patrie ou la mort, nous vaincrons. Merci, camarades.
So,
yeah,
called out the West, but he also called out his African colleagues as well, which which is surprising to say that it's rare, but it is.
Sorry.
To hear Talore, speak with that kind of conviction in terms of what has happened in his country and calling out the West. It's like, hey, you're calling us militias because we're fighting against you.
Yeah.
But when you do it, it's okay.
Right.
So, but
or when Ukraine does it, it's
that,
fine.
Right. So he was not saying this, I feel not just for Burkina Faso. He was also saying that, I think he was just saying this for Africa in general, and I think especially what's happening in Niger, I think a lot of what he said there can also kind of accommodate.
And I think he was the one who I saw had been talking about that African leaders are going to these summits begging for Africa, essentially.
Right.
So,
right.
He's a bit of a standoutish guy in that.
Right. So you would argue, and I know a lot of people might say very nationalist in scope, but at the same time, and he did mention, thankful for Putin as far as his,
help,
generosity as far as grain, and then like forgiving loans in Africa, and that's, I mean, it's good, but ultimately it's the idea, as he said, Africa is rich in its own right. And really, they shouldn't need the support of the Western world and even Russia and China to take care of their own people. So, but the idea that you're hearing this kind of stands from an African leader in this time, I think is very welcomed. And so, as you said, it's basically like, step with us and you'll find out. Step to us, you'll find out what will happen to you. So
I'm gonna hit you upside with a fucking folding chair. Y'all better watch out. Telling you right now.
Right. So anyway, let's get back into the article. In late July 2023, when Niger's president Mohamed Bazoum was overthrown, the United States and France immediately sprung into action, condemning his ouster and demanding that the pro-Western leader be reinstated. Many African activists highlighted the overwhelming hypocrisy of his response and of Western rhetoric about promoting democracy. In the past century, the US and European powers have legitimized, supported, and even organized dozens of coups across the global south in order to advance their economic and geopolitical interests.
Wrong way.
Oh, I put it here too. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. One of the most well-known historical episodes was that of Patrice Lumumba, the founder of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Congo had been a Belgian colony. Under brutal King Leopold II, Belgium committed genocide there, killing half of the colony's population, Congolese population.
Half.
Lumumba helped lead an independence movement against European colonialism and was democratically elected to the DRC's first prime minister in 1960. US President Dwight Eisenhower ordered the CIA to assassinate Lumumba. With the help from the spy agency, Belgium supported a coup to remove him. The democratic elected Congolese leader was kidnapped and murdered. His body was subsequently dissolved, his body in acid. Just a few teeth were left behind.
Jesus.
This is how Western governments treated anti-colonial leaders during the First Cold War. They sponsored coups to remove them and subsequently installed and propped up right-wing pro-imperialist dictatorships that ruled for decades with an iron fist. The Western response to the July 2023 coup in Niger was completely different. Immediately, the French government denounced a neo-nationalist government led by the military. Emmanuel Macron's office vowed a strong and swift response, writing, "The president will not tolerate any attack against France in its interests," meaning uranium, specifically emphasizing its business interests in Niger. Uranium.
Yeah. It's like Trump saying it's for the oil. Like,
right. Well, except they're not as explicit as that.
Yes.
It's just our interests versus your resources.
Yeah. Yes, we would like all of your resources that we've been taking, please. How dare you not let us steal from you?
While sponsoring unelected coup regimes in Pakistan and Peru, the U.S. State Department also quickly released a statement condemning the new military government in Niger.
Mm-hmm.
The United States welcomes and commends the strong leadership of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, heads of state and government to defend constitutional order in Niger, it wrote. Referring to Niger's tuckled pro-Western leader, Washington called for the immediate release of President Mohamed Bazoum and his family and the restoration of all state functions.
The big
The U.S. added that.
Sorry, continue.
The U.S. added that it welcomes the dispatch of the special representative of the ECOWAS chair to Niger and will remain actively engaged with ECOWAS and West African leaders on next steps to preserve Nigeria's hard-earned democracy. By instrumentalizing ECOWAS to give unilateral cover to an intervention in Niger, the US and France are returning to the strategy they employed when they used NATO to wage war on Libya in 2011. At the same moment, the Western powers are also doing the same to justify another military intervention in Haiti, recreating an international alliance ostensibly led by Kenya to occupy the Caribbean nation. One of the principal economic interests that the West won't say that Western powers have in Niger is its uranium. The anti-poverty organization Foxfam published a report in 2013.
Yeah,
Oxfam.
They're shitty as shit, but yes.
Yeah, they are. Detailing how France was making a killing profiting off the uranium in Niger, which is one of the poorest countries in the world. The people of Niger, known as Nigerians, not to be confused with Nigerians from Nigeria, have seen almost no benefits from this uranium extraction. I mean,
yeah, how would they?
Oxfam cited a Nigerian activist who noted, in France, one of every free light bulbs is lit, thanks to Nigerian uranium. In Niger, nearly 90% of the population has no access to electricity. This situation cannot continue. It is incomprehensible that Niger, the world's fourth largest uranium producer and a strategic supplier for Area and France, is not taking advantage of the revenue from this extraction and remains one of the poorest countries on the planet, an Oxfam researcher added. The statistics have slightly changed in the decades since that report was published. As of 2023, Niger is the world's seventh biggest producer of uranium. But many Western media outlets have noted with fear how important Niger is for European energy stability. As you mentioned earlier, Niger coup sparks concerns about French EU uranium dependency, Politico warned. Niger supplies 15% of France's uranium needs and accounts for a fifth of the EU's total uranium imports, the media outlet reported. In 2021, Niger was the EU's top uranium supplier, followed by Kazakhstan and Russia. So
Kazakhstan, yeah.
So, well, this is when this is the problem with, NATO, basically the West putting sanctions on Russia, which has now affected their energy sources in Europe, especially Germany right now. Because Germany is in a recession. Now they're looking to Africa to be like, okay, since we can't get our shit from Russia, we're going to take more shit from you. So, but anyway, Politico added that the coup in Niger could be a challenge for Europe's uranium needs in the longer term, just as the continent is trying to phase out dependency on Russia, another top supplier of uranium used in European nuclear plants. Nuclear energy is relatively important in Europe. In 2022, it made up around 10% of EU energy consumption, slightly down from a peak of nearly 14% in 2002. In France, nuclear energy is even more significant. Since the 1980s, nuclear has become one of its top energy resources. By the 2000s, France's nuclear power exceeded its use of oil, peaking at nearly 40% in 2005. Nuclear still remains strong in 2021 at 36.5% of the total energy consumption, compared to 31% for oil.
Nope. All right.
Since the coup in Niger, both France and EU leadership have insisted that they will not be affected, stating that they have enough uranium in their reserves to last a few years. But if the nationalist government remains in power in Niger and abides by its alleged plans to cut off uranium exports, Europe could face economic consequences. This also comes at a complicated moment for Europe, which has led to boycott Russian oil exports and reduce imports of Russian gas. So, essentially, Europe has fucked themselves over in the foot.
That's called cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Right.
That's what that's called.
Some EU officials have proposed increasing nuclear energy production to end the region's energy reliance on Russia. But now one of the top providers of uranium the EU needs for that nuclear energy has seen a coup led by nationalists who oppose Europe's neo-colonial policies. This also comes at a moment in which several countries in Europe are going into recession. Germany, the manufacturing superpower at the heart of the EU, is deindustrializing
Yeah, that one's tough.
at breakneck speed, largely because it has lost major sources of the cheap energy that its heavy industry needs.
Yeah.
In addition to foreign economic designs on West Africa, the U.S. military has a massive footprint on the region, particularly in Niger, where it operates multiple bases. We talked about CARICOM, AFRICOM, how it's involved. Also have a link talking about AFRICOM, I think, last spring, I believe. And I think we reported that we don't know how many bases are in Africa because...
Yep. I'm going to done that with JB.
Yeah. No, I don't think that was with JB. But we don't know exactly how many military bases.
Yeah, and when asked, we're like, I don't know.
Right.
You know, so sure.
A 2019 report in PBS noted an increasing U.S. military presence in Africa, revealing that the Pentagon had nearly 800 personnel stationed in Niger. That figure later rose to roughly 1,000. General Thomas Waldhauser, the commander of the U.S. military forces in Africa, described Niger's pro-Western government as a good partner in a very, very bad. The phrasing, though.
Yeah, that's real
Like-
shitty. Yeah.
A good partner in a very, very bad
Right.
neighborhood.
They're one of the good ones. That's what that is. They're a good one. You know, they're not like those other ones with their music and their pants sagging. Like,
Right.
you know, like, okay. You know, just dog whistling right in front of us, but okay.
Right. PBS indicated that the U.S. military was creating a base in Agassiz, Niger, which will be the largest installation Air Force personnel have ever built. The U.S. has been operating drone missions out of another base in Niger's capital since 2013, the media outlet wrote, adding, the CIA is also believed to be using another drone base in northeastern Niger. Investigative journalist Nick Turst, reporting in 2023, described this U.S. facility in Niger, Airbase 201, as the linchpin of the U.S. military's archipelago of bases in North and West Africa, and a key part of America's wide-ranging intelligence, surveillance, and security efforts in the region.
Okay. Oh,
what is striking
soon.
is the neocolonial symbolism of the United States, maintaining these high-tech military facilities worth hundreds of millions of dollars in Niger, one of the most poorest countries on Earth, where the majority of the population doesn't even have access to electricity. Before the July 2023 coup, Washington saw the Nigerian government as a key ally in its attempt to isolate China and Russia. Again, we can guess why. Anthony Blinken took a historic trip to Niger in March in the first ever visit by U.S. Secretary of State.
Yep.
Democracy Now! Noted that this trip was part of the Biden administration's growing competition with China and Russia.
Yep. Which Victoria Newland's going over there too, right?
Yep.
Do you believe?
And she got told, basically.
Okay.
According to reports today. Niger is one of the last strongholds of U.S. security partnerships in the region, Brown University researcher Stephanie Sewell told the media outlet. Blinken's visit came just a few months after the State Department's December 22 U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit, which brought African heads of state to Washington, D.C. to meet with Biden. The State Department wrote that the summit was rooted in this recognition that Africa is a key geopolitical player. In other words, Washington sees the continent as highly strategic in its new Cold War against China and Russia.
And it's definitely going to try to keep its strategic advantages. So,
yes.
By whatever means necessary.
Right. So that was long, and there was a lot of information in that. And like I said, it was even longer. As I said, the full article, if you want to read it, is in the description. Shout out to our friend, Fiorella Isabel. She made a tweet that I think sums this up perfectly.
Yeah.
In a few tweets, and she did this in 3 tweets versus a long article. She wrote, the Niger coup isn't a standalone coup, but a continued wave of rebellion by West African nations and the continent against the unilateral neocolonial policies of the West. Niger ousted a U.S. NATO-backed government that was led by France, using good old neocolonialism to exploit the resource-rich country by keeping its people without electricity, 80% are without, but using those same resources to maintain their EU lifestyle. Niger had enough. Burkina Faso, with young revolutionary Ibrahim Traoré as its leader, stands with Niger, as does Mali, both having also ousted the French neo-colonialist military and have said that any Western military involvement in Niger would be the equivalent of a declaration of war against them. Algeria and Guinea backed the coup.
Please, Fee, come on.
Yeah, there's one more after this. ECOWAS, masked as a union for Africa, but really backs a NATO agenda on control of the state's resources by the West. These nations see that and have asked the bloc to stand with their people. Instead, the bloc has sanctioned Niger and put severe economic and travel restrictions. The bloc is supported by France and the US, and most countries, including Russia, want diplomacy and to work within the bloc. but it's more complex than that. As the Russia-Africa summit just concluded with Libya and others voicing their opposition to foreign interference and asking both Russia and other African states for their aid in ousting them. You also have Wagner in the region, as well as Putin's promise to discuss the matter. Diplomacy is one thing, but Russia and Africa both highlighted their allegiance based on mutual respect going back to Soviet times, and this is only growing stronger.
Mm-hmm.
China is also building on this relationship along with the BRICS bloc.
Yep.
What we are seeing is African states began to unite, and I won't paint it as easy, rainbows, or something happening overnight, but the Pan-Africanism and the dreams of Sankara and Gaddafi have been echoed by many current leaders as beginning to take mold in this emerging multipolar world, as Africa has done nothing but demand the respect of the national sovereignty for respective nations. Make no mistake that the hegemon will fight back. An injured beast lashes out even more after all. France depends on this uranium, and Africa is a continent that has been partitioned into sections of resources for the Western garden to exploit. But we are seeing the start of an actual revolution in a continent that the majority of the industrialized first world ignored for so long. Strap in, the most overlooked region full of determined and passionate people is rising, along with the entire global South. And for once, citizens of the West might finally be forced to understand what Western-centric exceptionalism means and how that nice style that is built on the back of war, famine, and exploitation is coming to a close, and the fall will be brutal.
I hope so, Fee. Hope we make it out.
Very beautifully worded.
Yep.
So we have some breaking news.
Okay.
Because as of today, France decided to do some shit. Shout out to our friend Nico, friend of the network.
Yep.
He posted this earlier because France actually did what they said they were going to do.
Cool.
So go ahead.
Rolling the bean footage.
This is not a drill. The Niger junta has said that the French armed forces have attacked Niger's National Guard and violated their no-fly zone ordinance. Now, France has denied all of these accusations. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I don't really fucking believe them, but they denied it. Now, a few days ago, I did a video specifically detailing why France has the most to lose if Niger's coup was to stay in place. And I said that they would be the ones to attack. And if what the junta is claiming is true, then France literally just said, fuck ECOWAS, fuck international borders, fuck international law. We're going to invade because our country literally cannot survive without stealing uranium from Niger. Now, some were claiming that this was merely just another coup in Africa and it will be quelled just like all the other coups. And most people won't really care about it. And I had been saying for some time that this could spark World War III because there are too many resources, too much oil, too much gas, too much uranium, too much gold, and too much dignity at stake for neocolonialists. They can't and they could not let this slide. And with the pipeline that is supposed to be built through Niger at stake as well, corporations couldn't afford to let this slide. This is going to get worse before it gets better.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and I was saying this earlier to you. This will probably be a rant. Not probably, it will be a rant. Don't think, and we've said this on the show in many different situations, but don't think what is happening in Niger is not going to affect us here in the West. Well, in the United States.
Yeah.
Because if France, because I can't see, Niger and those countries in West Africa like Burkina Faso and Mali backing down. And I think it's funny, and I also said this earlier before we went live, what happened over the weekend regarding the Montgomery call. You guys know about it, I'm sure, if you guys were on Twitter over the weekend. So we don't have to explain that. But I don't think it's a coincidence with what happened in Alabama is also happening in Niger at around the same time. And I think this is kind of an indication of the fact that the working class, and especially those in marginalized communities, and especially now, and we're talking internationally, the global South, have had enough bullshit
Right.
and are willing now to fight back. So
Well,
I
and
just
you
see
see
this.
World War II being a battle over the resources of Europe at the time, mainly when it came to Russia and America, right? It ended up like World War III will probably be about the resources of the global South, if anything. And you've been seeing this.
I would.
China and Russia are willing to go to bat for some of these fucking resources if they need it. Like,
Well, as I said to you earlier, China has been playing 4D chess with Africa for a long time, and now Russia is beginning to as well.
right.
So in terms of Russia paying off debts in African countries that were, the fault of the West, China's already had the infrastructure plans in place for decades now. And as Traore said, we have love. And I'm going to make the argument, Russia and China, you can make the argument whether Russia and China is better. To me, they're both capitalist in, I would say, a more diplomatic way compared to the West. But at least for them, the argument that I can make for Russia and China is that they're offering something tangible
In return, yeah.
to African countries. It's not perfect, but it's something that African leaders can recognize as,
well, it's also,
this is actually good for us.
Look, your team's only as good as your lowest player. Like, and if it takes Russia and China increasing not only their infrastructure, but their military infrastructure on top of that, right? All they got to do is give them arms and bases,
Right.
like we've been doing elsewhere, except we put our own bases and our own stuff there as opposed to giving it to them. You can make allies that will fight for you if that's what you need, which they are willing to do. So
right.
It's also on top of, I mean, we covered this last week by way of like a Soviet cartoon from the 60s. They've been a lot better to Africa than we have by far.
Right.
Like, it's not even a question.
Right.
At
least Russia China has had its issues, but
yes. But even China can sympathize with being that oppressed as they are, because China was for a long time. So
right, at least back then, yes.
Right.
But the argument that I'm making is not argument, but what I'm saying right now, don't think that just because it's Niger seeming, well, one, it's not small, and I think that's our problem here, is that we think all these countries are small and insignificant. No, they're not. With the resources they have, and like Desert Man has said, I did not know about the pipeline. I just read that it's being proposed to bring natural gas. Yes.
Right.
Yes. That's why it's working. They basically have to go essentially to war over this because they bombed the Nord Stream pipeline. So how else are they going to get? And where else are they going to get their energy from? They're going to get it from Africa, and now those countries are now beginning to rise up and being able to now saying, no, we're not taking this shit anymore. We're not going to back down now. That poses a problem to the West, and so for the West, they're going to be like, okay, well, we're going to have to go to war with you in order to steal the resources that we've been taking from you for centuries. And now with BRICS, part of players too, Africa has Russia and China as allies.
Yep.
Nuclear allies. So potentially, like in the short term, that's going to affect our wallets.
Oh yeah, already is.
Like, friend of the show, Jose Vega, I didn't pull this, but he sent a tweet out earlier where he posted his energy bill for his apartment in New York City. $500 for a month.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I've said this several times on the show, like over the course of the last few months, like, wait come this winter. Like, if you thought that last year was bad, this winter, especially how things are going in the world, is going to get way worse.
Well,
gas is already beginning to go back up in certain places. Food is just as expensive and will probably get more expensive. I saw in Yahoo article written that, you know how Amazon has Prime Day, like they just had Prime Day last month. They're thinking of having another one in October.
Yes.
Why? Because no one has no money. So the capitalists that be, they can't not afford not to make
they
their
gotta
profits over the
meet
holiday
demands.
season.
Right. Mhm.
So they need to start having, these sales early to entice people to start buying stuff early, so they're able to have their bottom line, kind of made up by the end of the year.
Yep.
So, so
Well,
it's
to me,
sad
it's
that people are not.
like, if you're in America has for so long been able to ignore its foreign policy, right? Like, that's happening over there. Here, we got our own issues, right? The foreign policy is suffocating all of the things here. All of the resources that you could be using to help here in any capacity are being and pick an issue. It relates to foreign policy at the end of the day.
Right.
Like, you don't think those...
This is why we say...
Like,
so this is why we say, like... Go ahead, and then I'll finish my...
Well, no, like, we have bases and biolabs in hundreds of countries now. You don't think that affects our domestic policy as well? Like, APAC has a giant, like, stranglehold over our shit, as well as NATO as a whole because of that. Like,
right.
It's essentially it's the money powers that be that are willing to maim and murder over these resources, regardless of who's in power, regardless of how much blood will be spilled to get it. They need that shit if they want to fucking live. And that's what we've been telling people about the New World Order or whatever. It's nothing fancy. It's just some rich motherfuckers who know the earth is dying and they want to be good. They want to make sure that they're going to be all right. Like, it's selfish shit at the end of the day. But Americans are so distracted that, like, none of this is, like, in their minds.
This is why, for politicians that do not give a fuck about foreign policy, like, it's especially dangerous.
Yep.
Because their decisions, due to their own ignorance, not thinking it's going to affect us here, more often than not does. So the idea that we're sending money to Ukraine, and I heard somewhere from another YouTuber who read something
They're
like,
about to send another 10
Africa
billion.
Right, and Africa is calling out the West, basically being like, we don't want your pity to send us anything when you're not taking care of the people here.
Right.
Africans are saying that.
Right.
They're basically saying charity begins at home.
Uh-huh.
You're trying to take care of folks in Ukraine, but meanwhile, you have people who are homeless here. You have people who are dying of lack of healthcare here. You have people who cannot barely afford, basic needs here. So, and like I said, the fact that this story is not being talked about more, like mainstream media, of course, mainstream media is not going to talk about this because in light of Alabama and what happened there, like we've been seeing this, like different waves of opposition against the establishment just kind of bubble up, like in various places.
Yeah.
That can't be like the mainstream media is smart. They're not going to promote any of this to people to start having ideas at all. But the reality is we're going to see more of this, especially abroad,
Mhm.
because, and I think more especially in the global south and more especially in Africa, because they're essentially are going to be the hotbed right now. They're going to be the next Ukraine
Yes.
right now in terms of the resources that they have between, and essentially act as the buffer between Russia, China, and the West. So, and if we go to World War III and potential, in addition to Taiwan, that's going to be a world of hurt here, you know, because where do we get most of our industry from? China. You know, if a lot of those supplies are shut down, we're
Yep.
fucked.
We're fucked.
So, you know,
Like-
so really, we need to really look at foreign policy a lot more seriously, and especially in Africa, a lot more seriously, because, and as our friend DJ Unionize says all the time, the struggle is international. Like,
Mhm.
the working class in Africa have had enough and are beginning to rise up and are willing to topple over, you know, their NATO-instated puppets there. You know, what's to say, and I said this to you the other day, what's to say, you know, what happened, you know, in Alabama, if Black people here got together and stood in solidarity in each other in that same way and stomped the White House in
Mhm.
millions? Like, could you imagine that if, like, a host of Black people with folding chairs go up to the White House and be like, give us our reparations or whatever issue, fill in the blank. Otherwise, it's about to go down. Like,
Yeah.
I would love to see that here in that regard. But,
Me too.
you know,
They wouldn't let you
as
get
I
to a
said,
fucking door. They definitely wouldn't let you
Well,
in
we
a
all-
building.
well, we already saw that with
Yeah.
the George Floyd protest. But I think, but as I said, wait in the next few months because, like,
January
if things
6th, they let
continue
walk
as they
right on
go-
through. So,
Right. If things are moving on in a way that I think they're going to, there's going to be a lot more pop-offs like we've seen in this country, and not cultural. It's going to be all economically based, and because people are going to be hurting, especially come winter. So, you know, so we'll see what happens. And like I said, we're actually thinking of talking to. We're actually trying to see if we can get Kit Klarenberg or what's the other guy's name? I just forgot.
Alex?
Yeah, Alex Rubenstein on the show to talk to them about what's happening in Nigeria, because that's especially, you know, nefarious. given that the
Rubenthal and
president there-
Blumenstein, attorneys at law.
Yeah, that the Nigerian president is a fucking tool. You know, very much Western establishment asshole. So it'll be interesting. So even like, you know, as the saying goes, not all skin folk are kinfolk. So like even in Africa, you know, but I think that's more or less a stereotype, is that every African, you know, leader is corrupt. You know, that's not necessarily true. But I think in this case, it's definitely apparent for many of them, you know, especially in ECOWAS, who are basically siding with the West, you know, but it's
Wow.
good to see that a lot of these nations are beginning to overtake the Western powers in their countries and are fighting back militia style. But yeah, like I said, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Africa in the next few months. And this is definitely something that we want to look at more. But it's sad that not a lot of people, especially, I'm just kind of disappointed with independent media that this story is not getting as much attention as it should, because
I
it
think
will affect us. here
I think that'll, even the people who are ignoring it now will have no choice in the long run. But you know, anyway, speaking of another example of neocolonialism at play is happening in Papua New Guinea. So this is from Counterpunch, August 8th, about a place called Kiwi Rock, when the skies rained metallic death. And they're going to reference his documentary called Paradise Bombed by a guy named Friendly Jordies. I don't know if people like know that guy. He Australian YouTuber, has gotten his hands in some political stuff from time to time, does some comedic takes on that. Had his house firebombed not that long ago because of takes on, like we're about to hear. He recently did a thing on Assange that people should go watch, but I've put the link to that documentary in the description below. It's about 45 minutes. I have some parts from it and this article summarizing, but I think people should actually watch the entire thing. It's very good. I made Collin watch it last night, so hopefully we're versed enough. So it's called Paradise Bombed, and it's about what happened when burning metal death rained down on Kiwirraq, one of the most remote places on Earth, in October 2021. First contact was made with some villages here in 2000. So we're in 2023, 23 years. We've had contact with modernity, right? So was made with some villages here in 2000 in the form of Chinese drones, Serbian mortars, French rockets, came just 21 years later to annihilate them. The Indonesian military attacks on Kiwirraq, some 12 kilometers from occupied West Papua, border with independent Papua New Guinea, in dense rainforest and high mountains, are terrible enough to make anyone who doesn't have a heart of stone cry when watching this film. But even worse is knowing that they're just a small piece in a pattern of atrocities carried out by Indonesia with total impunity, because they're covered up and assisted by its allies in respectable democracies. I don't know if anyone watches survival shows, but Survivor Man's in Papua New Guinea, he was like, this is one of the hardest places to live in the world. Like, because of the mountainous rainforest terrain, it's ridiculous, right? Like finding food in that kind of environment is not easy. So that plays a part later, which is why I bring it up. So there's plenty of information available, but the atrocities are still happening. If you ask the essential questions of what, bombing, mortar rockets, M16 and sniper attacks, the where, Kiwirraq, when, October of 2021, and how, modern weapons supplied by Indonesia's Western allies, the why, land grabbing for mines, oil palms, etc., and who, the last one, who, is the hardest and really upsetting one. In crimes like these, who usually refers to the victims, but rarely to the responsible who. Who? Christopher, where am I? Because they have all sorts of ways of covering up, the German philosophers Christoph Dimmerling and Hilge Landwehr, cited by Caitlin Emick in Against Hate, write that collective dispositions of hatred and contempt cannot subsist without the corresponding ideologies which represent the socially despised or hated persons as a social harm, a danger, or a threat. So similar to how our last story, where they called, what was it, Niger, were, part of the bad neighborhood, right? Right. So
That's a novel.
Yep. Indonesia blatantly.
It's only bad to kind of downplay the resources.
Yeah.
And I think that's on purpose, because it's the idea of like, it's kind of like if you mention something like the hood here, but there might be like, I don't know, like decent housing or whatever, but it's like, oh, we need to downplay, the gifts of a certain neighborhood, or in this case, a certain region, so we can secretly take their shit, but have like the masses believe, oh, this is probably this is probably not shit.
Right.
So won't think none the wiser. So that's on purpose to have people have this mentality of these countries of being like poor and nothing good is going to amount other than when actually underneath the surface there is.
And I think the documentary goes on to talk about, I think it was Roosevelt, right? Who one of his advisors was this guy who owned a mining company essentially that is still working in Papua New Guinea, right? To enact this essentially peace talks where it was essentially strong arming Papua New Guinea to conform, similar to, I'm sure, Niger will have come up as well soon, right? So Indonesia blatantly represents the hated persons of West Papua as a social harm, standing in the way of development. Terrorists armed with bows and arrows who are threatening progress, the progress of who? In 1981, the Indonesian Army's Operation Clean Sweep against West Papua resistance to its UN-blessed military occupation used a slogan that clearly expressed its genocidal intent. Let the rats run into the jungle so that the chickens can breed in the coop. The rats were West Papuans, and the chickens, Indonesian trans migrants, who are used to create buffer zones and occupy the land in a way that is friendly to Indonesian intentions. I don't know where to find the appropriate language to write about this. It's too sickening and enraging for the words I know, even swear words, but I can detail some of the collective dispositions of hatred and contempt of the responsible who in this story, by which I mean what Western governments and transnational companies have been aiding, abetting, and tolerating for decades, and what the corresponding ideologies of neoliberalism, the widespread ignorance, indifference, and impotence are allowing. The first account is the personal experience of Bini Winda, interim president of the United Liberation Movement for West Papua. In 1917 to 1978, attacks on the Bileam Valley of the Central Highlands, 4,146 people were murdered in aerial bombings and strafings of villages using American-supplied Bronco OV-10 planes. I'll read that again. 4,146 people were murdered with American planes, as well as in a wholesale shooting in 1977. Indonesian military aircraft bombed many Lani villages in the highlands, including Bini's village. Bini remembers an attack where their huts and crops were burned, and many his family were killed or injured. Between 1917 and 1983, Bini and his family, along with thousands of other Highlanders, lived in hiding in the jungle. Violence from the military remained a constant threat. In one particularly harrowing incident, soldiers happened to cross Bini's family in the jungle. The soldiers ripped Bini's 2-year-old cousin from his auntie's arms and threw her to the ground with so much force that the child's back was broken. Then they raped his auntie, forcing Bini to watch. His small cousin died 2 weeks after the attack, his auntie sometime later from her own injuries. In West Papua, sexual violence and torture are favored forms of dehumanization. The Asian Human Rights Commission reports that in the same period, people were tortured with hot bayonets. Village leaders in Tiam were sliced with razors. Civilians were beaten with axes, and some others were buried alive. A tribal leader named Nalakun Kibak was slaughtered, and his blood was kept in a bucket. Lieutenant Colonial Sokemi, who was a military commander from Niger, later forced the other tribal leaders, teachers, and priests to drink the blood at gunpoint. Some of the arrested individuals were forced to get into big barrels filled with water and locked there until they drowned. Some of those arrests were thrown into wells while still alive, and those wells were later covered with soil. These reports have been available for years, but no action against the perpetrators have been taken. No action against the Indonesians' military enablers who just kept on enabling them because no one seems to care enough to stop them. Kirawak in the Pinggyungang Bintang Mountains Regency nearly presented with its official link as a normal place, just another district in Papua province, and not, of course, in what is really occupied West Papua, of 476.4 kilometers, had a population of 1,942 people in the 2010 census. If not yet dead, they're all hiding in the mountains now. So who are the victims? They're the next speaking customary owners of the land, the Nagalam Kupal people, who have a nature of revering subsistence economy, of carefully rotational slash and burn agriculture, food gardens, pigs, chickens, hunting, and gathering of wild food and medicines. Sounds like a alright life. Linguistically, they're closely affiliated with the Min people near Tumlabil in New Guinea, but colonialism separated them with its cruel border that respects nothing of people and natural setting. Their cosmology is ethical, attuned to sustaining the balance of nature in a universe with the god Atanki as the utmost creator for the Nagalm Kupal. Their traditional customs and beliefs are essential to every aspect of their lives, things like building a house, marrying, or repairing a construction, all of which follow time-honored rituals. This respect for and attachment to their land and their culture makes them enemies of military men who want to dig up everything and poison it for gold or devastate it with oil palm plantations in protecting this biodiverse land. And by extension, the whole planet, Nagalm Kupal became terrorists that must be exterminated. They literally called them rats, right? So in September 2021, there were reports in the Indonesian media that members of the so-called KKB, the armed criminal group, in reality, the Free Papua movement, the OPM we talked about earlier, attacked a Kiwiwak health facility, upon which a nurse ran away and fell into a ravine. According to officials cited by the Indonesian news agency Antara, the health worker died after being tortured by the terrorists. Unsurprisingly, the terrorist-ridden claims of the story are respectfully echoed abroad in, for example, the New China news agency Xinhua, which affirms that armed criminals burned a health clinic in late April. The Indonesian government declared armed criminal groups in Papua and West Papua provinces as terrorists for inciting violence and being separatists to the country's sovereignty. Not to be outdone, in buddy-buddying Indonesia, the West Australian reports Kiwiwak was the scene of arson attacks by rebels. The West Papua National Liberation Army claimed responsibility for the attack on the public facilities. The Indonesian government designated separatist insurgents as terrorists in April. So we got a couple of world powers going along with this story that's obviously been fabricated, right? So fake news conducted by Indonesian military men and their allies is part of the same old story. An investigation by the Papuan People's Assembly tells it differently, and given the familiar pattern, I would say accurately. One witness suggests that the first provocation from the side of the perps, and second, retaliation against their own crime attacks in Kiwiwak, aim to drive the traditional owners from the land, which is being eyed for gold and copper mining as a kind of extension to the OK Teddy mine just across the border in Papua New Guinea. Indonesian human rights defenders describe links between such actions of Indonesian military forces, retired police and military men, now government ministers who are trying to expand mining operations. The September attack on the Hell Southern Kiwiwak involved a group associated with the former regent, Kostan Otemka, who, during his tenure from 2016 to 21, encouraged mining exploration by Indonesian government company PT Anaka Tambang, Synergy, with the Army on improving security and Mind ID. There are names of retired and incumbent security force members such as Mr. Doni Monardo and Mr. Muhammad Munir, who is still holding the position as the head of Strategic Analysis Board of Indonesian State Intelligence Agency. So we're having their form of the CIA involved. One mineral exploration site presently being eyed is Gunung Antaros, located between Kiwiwak and the PNG border in the Sepik River catchment. This corroborates the findings of Bini Winda and what any long-term Indonesian watcher has seen before, which is that the Indonesian government is creating violence and chaos to feed these troops. As the head of the Indonesian Parliament, Bambang Susatyo, ordered, "Destroy them first. We will discuss human rights matters later." What the fuck, Care Bear? Like, could you imagine any Russian or Chinese saying words like that? Like,
well, given what I could with China, honestly, but I think that will downplay it.
Yeah.
No, with China, I said China. Not with Russia though.
No. So, yeah, I mean,
yeah, as we said in the last segment, at least publicly, there is a mutual respect.
They'll at least lie
or at
to your
least some
face.
respect. Right.
Yeah, which this
You
is
know,
just
or
like
for the global.
we're gonna kill them first, and then whatever human rights after we'll deal with.
Right.
So, the documentary Paradise Bond begins with goose-stepping Indonesian soldiers, a first display of how uncertain the government's legitimacy is when goose-stepping signals more about domestic repression than protecting citizens from foreign attacks. It then describes the attacks almost a month after the health center incident. There are images of unexploded bombs. Witnesses counted 152 drones. The people were busy with everyday tasks. They heard the helicopters and ran to hide in the mountains. Rockets were shot from 4 to 5 helicopters, mortars fired from drones, and there were soldiers with M16 and sniper rifles. They attacked houses, food gardens, pigs, and chickens with bombs and rockets. Helicopters were shooting rockets at civilians. Those who couldn't run into the mountains to hide were killed by rockets and mortars. Some 13 people, mainly children and the elderly, one woman who had 2 small children, she got 2 kids, so the kids were grabbed and killed. She was shot by M16. Those who survived the attack are now trying to stay alive in the extreme conditions of the Star Mountains, one of the rainiest places on Earth. At least 200 are known to have died from starvation, but the displaced people are scattered in remote places, so many more than that would have died. They can't return to their villages because they've been guarded by Indonesian snipers since the attack, and the tracks are booby-trapped. People trying to return have been murdered, tortured, murdered, starvation, sickness, sniper, M16, mortared, rocket booby-trapped. Foreign interests have brought grief, displacement, suffering, and death to Kiwi Rock. So I wanted to play this because I'm not sure how much China is involved, but it seems like to some degree their military industrial complex might be involved, as well as Australia's in the West here.
Were fired and dropped by drone.
So they're going to talk about the drones that they mentioned a second ago. Let me full screen this. Here we go. Nope. Here.
Were fired and dropped by drone.
Drone.
Yeah.
I asked the witnesses to draw the drones that dropped the mortars. The 2 witnesses that could independently came back with strikingly similar pictures.
Now, what did that picture look like to you?
Helicopter.
At first, I thought...
Right. Looks like a helicopter at first, but wait, there's more.
There was confusion, and the witnesses were drawing helicopters. But they reassured me that these were small drones dropping mortars.
Oh.
Which ones, though, you think?
This picture from 2021 shows an Indonesian soldier in Papua, seemingly from BigMadCrab, the mobile brigade corps, standing next to a drone model almost identical to what the witnesses drew. We've identified the drone pictured as a Xi'an Blowfish A3, a Chinese model that boasts of a swarm function, where 10 drones swarm a target in unison, utilizing...
Now, we've talked about AI drone swarms before, yes?
Yes.
So, yeah. You know, I mean, I try to warn people. I try.
Artificial intelligence to take off and attack a target with full autonomy. This is the very cutting edge of modern warfare. You wouldn't have much luck defending yourself from these with bows and arrows.
That's what they're capable of doing.
Right. We've talked about this, and like people need to be more concerned about AI than I think, because I think we're hearing a lot of AI in terms of the media industry,
Yes.
like entertainment.
Mhm.
We're not talking about AI in terms of war. Like
No.
we have the technology already to do that, and that's way more concerning compared to
By far.
having an AI-based movie or having an artist. You're able to create a song done by an artist that might be dead via AI. This is, you know, a lot more concerning, or it should be more concerning.
Airburst anti-personnel round dropped from AI drone. You think is a bad idea, Collin? Yeah, probably. The other thing to mention with this is that they modified these mortar rounds. Okay, so if we go back to them dropping them, if I can,
target with full autonomy. This is the
so see there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're using mortar rounds, which normally you drop into a mortar and it shoots that way, right? Big arcing things. Okay, they modified these to normally the mortar round wouldn't have tail fins. They added those. Okay, they also added a much larger and easier to engage trigger, essentially, on the cone of the mortar, right?
Right.
Where essentially it was solely designed to be activated by softer roofing materials, such as like sago palm, which is like what is used for like huts here, you know?
Right.
So, I mean, they definitely thought about killing these specific people with these.
Right.
So
the very cutting edge of modern warfare. You wouldn't have much.
We've also seen this in Ukraine to no end, by the way. Drone warfare is insane over there.
Like defending yourself from these with bows and arrows. This man is removing parts of mortars dropped by a drone that got stuck in a roof. After you were bombed, did you went and collected these? Where did you find these ones?
This one. Kami ay bravo yung bayrun dajo. Kakaboneng yung manik bayrun dajo di. Yes, bomb is dropped everywhere, garden, village, and etc.
Was it dropped from a helicopter or from a drone?
Camera no. It's thrown from a drone.
Drone. So this one's from a drone, goes down like that, and it's like the green one we saw yesterday, and then this one. Is this one come from a helicopter or? Yeah.
Yes. Drone by the Bihar. Kami heli by this from helicopter. Yes.
Were they shooting rockets at civilians?
No.
Civilians.
Yes.
We hear that those who couldn't run into the mountains to hide, mostly the young and the elderly, were the ones killed by the rockets and mortars.
Bilha was killed by bomb dropped.
And who was Bilha?
His sister's daughter.
And how old was Bilha?
4 years.
4 years old. And where was Bilha when the bomb was dropped?
She cannot run away, so she's baby and she cannot run away. So while managing to run away, bomb dropped and killed.
Killed her.
Yep. All people unable to run away into the bushes to hide themselves were bombed and killed.
And killed.
Yes.
And they died from not being able to eat food?
No,
they were bombed. They were bombed.
They were bombed.
Those who didn't die in the attack still had to survive being dispossessed without food or shelter in the Star Mountains, a place thought to be one of the rainiest on Earth. This footage shows the journey to relative safety the residents of Kiwi Rock had to make.
But yeah, I mean,
they were in the bush. They stayed in the bush till now.
Till now.
Yes.
So we'll come back to those rocket parts that they were talking about.
Were fired and
but the article continues a bit. Anything you got to say on that before we continue?
I mean, I said it, just right. Once again, global south. Once again, I think it's significant. At least you can make the argument that people are familiar with Africa, and maybe a couple of countries within the continent like this. This is a remote place in Papua New Guinea. No one's heard of this.
No one can even. It's literally you have to fly in. Like, there's no, you can't get to it any other way.
Right. And you would figure, like, of all places in the world, that this would be the least likely way you're going to have military warfare like this. But of course, the same issue, they have resources that imperialists want. So we got to get rid of the civilians. And a lot of their, their lines of defense are not going to be able to stand with
they
AI
got
drones.
Bows and arrows, bro.
And arrows.
I know Avatar was like super good, but that's not how it works. M60 versus like a bow and arrow just doesn't like the Zulu at least had numbers against the Gatling guns, Like this is like guerrilla shit that they're hoping will. So anyway, China's not alone in this. So the drones were Blowfish A3 UAVs, a Chinese model with an intelligent swarm function. 10 AI-controlled drones swarm a target in unison. Fragments that have been found reveal that the mortars were made by the state-owned Serbian company Krusik in 2020 and are specifically designed to be dropped from aircraft rather than fired from a mortar barrel and to affect a much larger surface, as well as being modified to explode when they hit a much softer target than usual, for example, a house with a sago-leaf roof or a human. The Thales F-768 rockets, or Thales, I think, have a warhead designed to explode into 8,000 effective splinters, covering a circle of 132 square meters and killing everything within it. It's steel rain, Collin. That's what that is. So, this guy we're about to see, Stephen Loosely, is Thales Australian deputy chairman. And we're going to see what odious excuses he has for this shit.
Is the deputy chair of Thales Australia, the closest subsidiary of Thales to West Papua. But if we are arming them, how do we prevent these states that don't have robust institutions?
How are we arming them, and to whom are we referring?
I've got an example here. Do you know what this is?
Looks like part of a spent round.
Yes. Do you know what type of round this is?
No, 7.62, something like that.
No, this is a Thales-made FZ-68 that I retrieved in around Kiwi Rock in Indonesian-occupied Papua. It was used on civilians there. I've got some pictures.
Well, I'm not familiar with this, so it's difficult for me to comment.
Yeah. So, this is a village in October 2021, a civilian village that the Indonesian army went in and basically blew to the floor with Thales-made weapons, and this is part of it. How are we ensuring that?
Well, that's an assertion, but I am unaware of any of this. So it's something that you would need to be asking Indonesian authorities and the relevant Australian authorities. This is not something that has come through my wheelhouse.
But aren't you not an executive director?
No, I'm the deputy chair of Thales Australia. We do not export these kinds of capabilities, insofar as I'm aware, to Indonesia.
But is it not your responsibility to
No, it's
ensure?
not.
It's not. So this is another piece of it.
This is something that should be directed to Thales Group in Paris, if it's true.
So, I know that they did contact them and received no response. They also contacted like every other organization this guy tried to like pass the buck to. No response from them either. So, but yeah, like Tails also, he also instructed him to talk to Tails France. Now, where do you think those French rockets might end up elsewhere? We just talked about this earlier. You know,
I mean,
like
Ukraine.
Yep.
Like anywhere really in the global south where
Yep.
there are resources that the colonizers want.
This little Bushmaster that Thales has as well. It's like a big armored truck, right? He talked about that like Ukraine was one of their biggest buyers, you know? So like in that video. But the documentary shows an interview with the deputy chair of Thales Australia, Stephen Loosely, who, shown the fragments of the Thales rocket, purses his lips in annoyance and claims, "I'm not familiar with this, so it's clearly not for me to comment." In fact, Loosely, a former Labour senator, is very familiar with many secrets of the Australian weapons establishment as, for example, inaugural chairman of the Woomera Prohibited Area, the world's largest land-based weapons testing range where, surprise, surprise, Thales Bushmaster and Hawkeye armored vehicles were tested. Watching Loosely, the human embodiment of the trait he represents, made me want to throw up. I don't have publishable words of my own to describe this loathsomeness, so I'll borrow from Shakespeare in the form of Henry the Fourth, the Eighth, one of those, fourth, yeah,
fourth,
V-1, right? He's an obscene, greasy tallow catch who can sit in his antiseptic office, smirking as he claims that these vehicles that mow down demonstrators in West Papua are designed for protecting people, for carrying people. In his trade, there are plenty as bad or even worse people willing to kill the Ngalam Kupel or test their nuclear weapons, with all the consequences or sacred aboriginal land at Woomera, but who feel offended in their respectability when a journalist like filmmaker Christo Lanker bears evidence. In its presentation, Thales is greener, and it's building a future we can all trust. In the video, they had like one of their advertising videos, you know? Like nice inspirational music with things like they're green and for a better future, right? So the future Thales is building is actually the one presently being destroyed, as shown to us by the climate catastrophe, which is largely caused by devastation of habitats like the rainforest of Kiwarok. The shameless lie hidden in Thales' greener claim is a measure of the absence of moral standards in the Western culture it represents. Among the trusting, we, the all which excludes people like the ethically oriented Ngalam Kupel, perhaps the biggest and at least the most perverse lie is what the company calls itself. It's named after one of the seven sages, Thales, a founding figure of ancient Greece, credited with the formulating the advice, "Know thyself," which is inscribed on the temple at Delphi, dedicated to Apollo by the Pelagians, who believed that this god of sun and healing protected them from plague and invasion. Know thyself, according to the weapons manufacturer, is embodied by a turd of a sneering man who knows nothing about the death-dealing products he deals in. With all the know-nothing respectability of a pale blue shirt, spotted tie, which he carefully straightens before being shown photos of the bombing raids and assertion, he says, and seated at a pristine table in a business office of a moribund society. Which we are we with? In 1941, Hannah Arendt wrote, "You can only defend yourself as the person you're attached to." She was referring to the question of a Jewish army. But there's a lot more substance here than the apparently limited concern of the statement. Who are the West Papuans being attacked as, in their experience, they're defending themselves as West Papuans, as the defenders of their identity, their cosmology, their way of life, their rainforests, mountains, and rivers, but the attack responsible, who that calls them rats, monkeys, nobodies, and the soldiers wearing weapons, the loose-sleeves and suits, and everyone, the supposed we, from whom Thales is claiming trust, behind collective dispositions of hatred and contempt that allow West Papuans to be treated like vermin, the definition that one who has imposed on another who. And to go back to Shakespeare, now to the Merry Wives of Windsor, what the who of Western democracies are aiding and abetting in West Papua is the rankest compound of villainous smell that ever offended nostril. Yet, at least in words, if the appeal is to people who hate this stench, who don't want to pretend that it smells like roses of civilization, the remedy is simple. An anonymous eyewitness victim of the attack says, "The manufacturer of this bomb, I suggest, please you put a stop to them. Stop making the bomb. But first, we need to heed the original Thales and what Aristotle called the beginning of all wisdom. Know thyself, and know who we are as an expression of what we are tolerating, close up or at a distance." Care Bear, thoughts?
Just more of the same shit, except, as I said earlier, this is a very extremely obscure, because I never heard of these people before. It's almost kind of, again, it's colonization of a different sense in a way, but this is almost kind of reminiscent to, you know, the Native Americans here. This is kind of what
Palestinians in Israel,
so
Africans in Africa, South Americans in South America.
The only difference is, it's like here, it's at least you can make the argument that Palestinians are fighting back.
Yeah.
You know, Africans are beginning to fight, but like the global South, for the most part, is beginning to recognize the issues. And not to say they have the means, but I think they have the willingness to fight back, you know, given the history. You know, this is in Indonesia, so these are more isolated islands, you know, so they don't necessarily have the kind of cultural bonding, I would say, that a lot of these other regions in different parts of the world have, in a way that they're able to come in solidarity. Not to say they can't, but they're just so small. And then, you know, these are more naturalist communities. So it's very much, you know, we fish, we hunt, we cut trees. That's our life. We're not industrialized in any way. You know, like, well, you can argue most of the global South isn't either, but there is some aspects of industry in those countries, many of those countries, that these areas don't.
Yeah.
And the only way they can defend themselves is essentially a bow and arrow, or run, or flee into the mountains or the hills.
Take the white man's gun, which they are more than willing to do.
Right.
You know?
In order to, not even to defend themselves, it's just the idea of just surviving, which is really, it sucks.
Yeah.
You know, but it just gives more of a light to the situation of how colonialism, even like in this part of the world, you know, down under, more or less, you know, is happening there too. And so it's just more in the same shit than just a different version of it.
Yep. Speaking of fighting back, you brought a story closer to home.
To me, at least. But I think as far as the issue, I think is very significant and not unique, but in what the ask is, which is a lot closer to what I think we've been saying here, and I think just and in general. But like I said, this is a local DC story, at least for me. So Compliments Only is a sub shop. But the workers there are going on strike. They're looking to unionize, and they're looking for a minimum wage, which you would think that would be a story that is talked about more. Like a lot of places, depending on where it is asking for a minimum wage. you know, whereas here at this sandwich shop, small business, they're asking for a living wage.
Yeah.
So let's catch up. So this is written in DCist. This is a local DC newspaper, and it's written by Amanda Michelle Gomez, where she writes, workers at beloved DC sandwich shop, compliments only, seek to unionize. So she writes, employees of beloved DC sandwich shop, compliments only, are trying to form a union and seeking a 21 per hour wage. Last June, in late June, a majority of the workers, 8 out of an estimated 10 employees, first asked owners Pete Stilkove and Emily Sipes to recognize their union, but they declined, according to multiple workers. They went public with their union drive this past weekend, so this happened last month.
Okay.
When employees, including several who walked off mid-shift, demonstrated at the DuPont Circle sandwich shop. Compliments only owners did not respond to repeated requests for an interview. But the owners did provide a statement to Eater, saying they respect their employees' rights to express their opinions in a lawful manner.
Which
they
is,
did not
have
share
to
their
say.
thoughts.
Like, that's bare minimum.
They did not share their thoughts, however, on their workers' union drive, but emphasized they care about their employees. 3 employees and about 2 dozen supporters visited the sandwich shop Saturday with the intention of picketing if owners again declined to recognize their union. We're going to ask you again to recognize us as a union and give us a wage increase, employees Zach Slavin, Kurt Sitkov, and Sipes, who were working that day. Sipes said it's nothing they can answer at the moment, as a few dozen people, including patrons and press, watched from inside the shop. So, in other words, they didn't want to out themselves. Seconds later, 3 employees from behind the counter walked off their shifts, leaving Sitkov, a manager, and 2 other employees to make sandwiches for the lunchtime rush. The 6 employees and their supporters then exited the shop to picket just outside. They picketed for roughly an hour as the shop remained open. This isn't targeted towards Pete and Emily. This isn't malicious in any way. I still hold a deep respect for the both of them, said Dominic Pezzuto, who walked out Saturday. It's just that we're unhappy. And we tried to come to them privately multiple times, and it didn't work. And it feels like our hand was pushed and we want to get recognized. We're not going to back down. The employees started to talk about forming a union this past spring because the owners declined to meaningfully increase their wages when they individually asked, multiple employees say. They said their bosses offered 25 cents per hour increase or so, but that's about it. In June, when they asked for a union recognition, they submitted a petition asking for that at a minimum of $21 an hour, according to multiple workers. But the owners said they couldn't afford to at this time. Instead, the owners offered a $17 hourly wage, which left them feeling slighted because the city's minimum wage was about to increase to $17 last month. On July 6th, they asked again for the wage increase, as well as collective bargaining agreement within 90 days. But their bosses did not give them a clear answer, which prompted the July 15th demonstration, the employees said. The compliments-only owners told Eater that they had been committed to providing compensation and benefits that were consistent with industries for small local enterprises. They declined to share compensation information about their employees, saying personal issues are private, Eater reported. We recognize that at times, good people with the best of intentions will encounter areas of disagreement. To that end, we respect unconditionally our employees' right to express their opinions in a lawful manner and wish them continued success as employees of Compliments. Oh God, this is
why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying?
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's just such. I can't even say like. This is just such a vague and like non-committal statement here. Like, oh God,
Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Please disperse.
Just like, just get out of here. Don't worry about it.
Dominic Pizzuto said they earn the city's minimum wage. Now, prior to it being increased, it was 15, and now it's 17, and struggle to afford to live in DC. If management doesn't recognize their union for signed union cards, workers would have to file for a formal election through the National Labor Relations Board. Workers generally dislike elections because the process is time-consuming and slows down their momentum to bargain for a contract. United Food and Commercial Workers Union Local 400, which would be the bargaining agent if workers succeed in unionizing, says a majority of compliments-only employees that are union eligible would sign cards. Pizzuto started working at the shop in April and earns the city's minimum wage of $17 an hour. They said they are struggling to find an apartment with their current hourly wage, and I'll explain more in a minute why. But they hesitate to quit in search of a better paying job because they'd rather stay at compliments only and unionize so they can bargain for wages they think that they and their colleagues deserve. Slavin, who's worked at compliments only for nearly 2 years and earned $17.50, feels similarly. He points out that the living wage in DC is $22 an hour for a childless adult, according to MIT's living wage calculator. Slavin said he's disappointed by the owner's response thus far. And actually, I did pull it up.
Well, and you live here. How do you feel $22 an hour would do you here?
Honestly, even that, actually, let me do some quick math.
Yeah.
So give me 1 second.
2 plus 2 is 4.
22.
Yeah, that's quick math.
40. So $22 an hour, if you assuming you work for a full year, is just under $46K a year.
Okay.
There's no way, even like with that the living wage, you can get by on that in DC. Like the average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment here is $1,800 a month. That's average.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your month,
So-
a month, like a month.
A month.
Fuck. All right.
That's average. Like easily, depending where you live in DC, like even for a studio, you could probably be pushing to around now like $2,000 a month for a studio. I think that's
Holy
more typical. If not. So that is basically, and I haven't done the math. That's basically half of your salary right there, just for housing alone.
So this would be at 22 an hour. You're talking like, what is that? A year? You just did this, right?
Just under
47.
47. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you take out $2,000 for a fucking his house, like a place to live.
Yeah, that's 24,000. Yeah, so that's basically just about half your rent.
How are
salary.
they claiming that that's the living wage then? Like when was that done? In 2019?
Right.
2019?
2019. So we should probably look for something
more recent, but that's
honestly,
what they're going off here too. They might not have done it since then.
That's what they're going off here. So if anything, really, like,
It's like
this
consensus
is still
shit,
a low
probably.
ball. Right, but it's still a low ball. I would argue that it'd be more closer to 25.
25, 26, 30.
Yeah, 25 to 30, I think would be more realistic.
And if I was the union guy, I'd come in asking for 50. Like,
right,
you know, and then they'll give you half of that. Like, so, I mean, that's how.
So really, honestly, to be honest, I said they were asking for a living wage. It is given the numbers here, you know, this is back in 2019, but, you know, given inflation right now, you know, yeah, I would argue that it should be probably closer. They should be asking for closer to 25.
Oh,
You know, so
the next statement kind of continues what we're fucking saying.
right. We can't afford $17 sandwiches like the shop sells, he tells DCS WAMU on Saturday. It really feels unfair that we're giving our labor and working really hard to make this place as great as it is and not being compensated adequately to live reasonably comfortable lives. So I also checked this weeks ago when I first thought I was going to do this story a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Sandwiches there typically range from $11 to $18.
Which is wild. The fuck they putting on that shit? Gold leaf? Like foie gras gold leaf? Like, you know.
Like, no, but like food, like buying food
I know.
here, like it's and like even for us like
yeah, with $30 burger. You're like, what the fuck? It's fucking hamburger. How can you like
but not even that, like even McDonald's, like
McDonald's
you're spending around like maybe around 15 for a meal now.
Right.
About.
Yeah, for the worst food in the world, like, you know. So, Desert Mantis in chat. What happened to the $5 sub? Well, it almost put Subway out of business, is what happened.
Right.
Like,
right.
That's what fucking happened. They said, oh yeah, let's make sure we tie our biggest seller with a price, and then never be able to change that for fucking months. You know,
years.
Right.
That was a campaign for them for years.
Years.
So,
right. Yeah. So
and it worked, but they weren't.
Yeah,
making
it cost
money
them so much money at the end of the day because like they couldn't
they had to downsize
keep up with
of
yeah, which fired a ton of workers, which like you know, you saw stores going from like 4 people at the Subway to like one. Right. Like fucking, you know, Quentin's back there in the fucking back making everyone sandwiches at Rush. You know, you're like, what the fuck is this? You know, like, do I need to come back there and help you, bro? Like, what's going on?
Also, just to give you some context here for this sandwich shop and where it's located, it's in DuPont Circle, which is, for those of you who know DC, it's like upscale, like old neighborhood. So
the money
typically
is
like
there.
Exactly. So like pre-pandemic, like a lot of people would commute into DuPont Center. So these are typically people who are living in Maryland or Virginia who are commuting in to go into this area and would, you know, like this would have been a place where people would go for lunch at lunchtime. So typically this would be in an area where people would have money relatively to spend, like $15 for a sandwich, you know. But since the pandemic, you know, like people, although, you know, now the mayor is pushing and now Biden is pushing for people to return to work now in person. So
and giving
not
your
sure
fucking
how
money for college debt, we definitely need that money back, and you know, essentially bend over, you know.
Right.
So
but yeah, sandwiches. I'll say on average, a sandwich there is about $15.
Yeah.
At this place. So, but given where it is, and I'm sure rent, you know, is also kind of driving that cost. But essentially, it's like they get paid a sandwich an hour. Like, the way to think of it, it's a sandwich an hour.
It's fucking wild.
That's what I should have titled this.
Yeah,
honestly,
a sandwich an hour. Sounds like it sounds like someone's memoir, you know.
Right. Anyway, Zach Slavin says he has 3 jobs and his part-time gig at Compliments Only pays the least. This is one of the most physically demanding and the hardest in a lot of ways, and it pays by far the least, he says. That is unfair for me, and even more so unfair for my coworkers who are here full-time. Oh, God. So, if he's part-time, can't imagine what the full-time, like, yeah, so.
Dude, restaurant work, especially restaurant work like that, is fucking hell. It's the worst.
I know. Yeah, I worked very briefly at a place like this, like a super sandwich shop for a few months before I went to Africa, and it's long.
Well,
it's tiring.
The worst part is fucking people. Like normally, I've worked both. Like normal restaurant, you can be back of house, never see anyone. It's lovely.
Right.
I mean, it's not. It's super hard work there too. But you know, like, at least you don't have to deal with like what the servers and waitresses have to. Like at these places, you got to do both and be point of sale all at the same time.
Right.
Like
that was me. Like I had to make the sandwiches. I didn't have to make the soup. I had to make sure, depending on the soup, to keep it
was
warm
out that
or
day,
cold.
right? Yeah. Open the bag, pour it in the thing. You know.
No. Not soup did not come in bags. They were made in house.
Right.
And so making sure, obviously, if the soups were hot, that they stayed hot. If they were cold, they were remain cold. If it was like a gazpacho or something over the summer,
right?
So you had to do all that. Plus, I had to make the sandwiches too. So yeah, it was.
And you have to prep for all that a lot of times. Someone does get everything out, put out.
I don't remember how much I got paid, but it was like, I think at that time, like 10.
Right.
Like $10 to $11 an hour is what I was getting. This was back in like 2010.
And a lot of times when you're like literally the only person there, in some of these cases, like you get more than 4 people in, and it's like that's an hour and a half of work sometimes. Like depending, like of just nonstop, just your brain constantly doing something,
Right.
So like CEOs would have been taking a nap like a third of the way through, So
anyway, Sit Cove and Sipes opened compliments only during the height of the pandemic, when they found themselves out of work with the closure of the Coconut Club, where Sit Cove was sous chef and Sipes a co-owner and general manager. The sub shop was located on 14th Street Northwest for more than a year, then relocated to DuPont Circle in 2022. It's become a popular spot for breakfast and lunch since opening.
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
There you go.
This weekend's action garnered a lot of attention on social media, in part because the establishment is a darling of the local food world. It just won a Rammy Award, a local honor given out by the Restaurant Association Metropolitan Washington. The discrepancy between the shop's accolades and the workers' pay is the motivation behind the union drive, multiple workers said. So they actually use some leverage here in terms of, we're actually getting recognized for the good job that we're doing. Give us more money. The work we do isn't the bare minimum. So to be paid in that way is incredibly disrespectful, said Critter Woodward, who worked at Compliments Only since its opening in DuPont Circle location and earns $19 an hour. So I would probably guess that's probably the minimum, the full-time rate, I would guess.
Right.
We are professionals. This is just as real of an industry as any other one. I love what I do. I'm good at it. I want to be doing it for a long time, and I don't feel supported to be doing it. Critter Woodward's leads demonstration outside of Compliments Only. The bottom line is that we make Compliments Only what it is, and we want to be doing this for a long time, they said. But we need support, we need recognition of our union, and we need 21 an hour. Woodward said a union won't help them assure higher wages, but formalize workplace policies. There's no structure in place for discussion or recourse, they said, which can lead to communication breakdowns. Compliments Only is part of a greater trend of food service workers who sought to unionize in recent years due to low pay and poor workplace conditions that have long plagued the industry. The workers are looking to join the United Food and Commercial Workers Union Local 400, which represents thousands of local grocery store workers. Their labor group has also supported the employees of Politics and Prose. That's a very popular restaurant / meeting place here.
Gotcha.
Like a lot of shout out to Misty when Misty was here during her Assange event in October. We ended the event at Politics and Prose. So it's very well known for like famous people or like offers to come in, and do presentations, stuff like that in
Gotcha.
DC. So yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, interesting story, but I think it kind of goes along with stories that I know you and Indy have talked about, and how do we miss that in terms of like, like a lot of places now, a lot of industries now are asking for money. But as I said, this was interesting in the sense that they say living wage. It's really not, given the numbers that they've given.
Yep.
And even that, they're kind of still lowballing, but
Well, and
it is
recently,
more than the minimum wage of what it is in DC. And the idea that even though they ask for $21 an hour, it's still not enough relatively, especially if you work full time,
Right.
to be able to afford rent or mortgage here. And then like just how expensive DC is, it is not sustainable to be able to have that be your only job and make an honest living. And this is what I think a lot of these workers are saying. Like, they want to make an honest day's work, and doing honest living. And they want to be compensated that matches, their talent and their work. And they feel slighted, and they're asking for more. So I appreciate them asking beyond what I think is typical. But as you implied, and as you said, they could probably even ask for more than that.
Yeah. I mean, at least going in, right? Like, don't ask for the exact thing you feel like you need. You need to, like, pad that a little. If your first demand is 50, they might give you, like, 30. When you started out, you thought you should ask for, like, 21, 25. You know what I mean? Like, that to me is part of it. And you should also have it tied to inflation. Like, you should tie it to something, cost of living.
The issue that I'm thinking of right now, and we talked about this with Jose a couple of weeks. Was it a couple of weeks or last week?
I think so.
We had him on.
Week ago,
last week.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, last week, when we're talking about the UPS workers and them asking for higher wages, if they get it, assuming how, because they're voting for this tentative agreement right now.
Yeah.
If it goes through, that's not to say that UPS won't cut hours, even though they made more money. That's the same thing that could happen here. Is,
well, and you saw
we can give you what you want, but that means we're going to cut your hours, so that way we don't lose too much of a profit.
Yep. And it also fucks over your full time on top of that, because they're not getting the full things that they wanted either. Like, recently I saw, now I'm blanking on Marvel, VFX team is starting to unionize as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you might start seeing VFX house unions too, which they put in so much work in so little time, and like, to get stuff done and get no representation, So,
well, I think that they may not do it, especially if AI becomes more of a stronger thing. This is
yeah, but who do you think is going to be doing that? Who do you think is going to be using the AI? It's going to be those guys. What guys that?
I think I was actually I actually was listening to something last night that Disney is seriously looking into AI.
Yes, they all are, because they're. Why wouldn't they? Like, you get a person who can code that kind of stuff really well, and bam, there's your next movie written, done. Like, so it's you're gonna see. That's why the VFX industry should be interested, because they're the ones that are going to be tasked with using these tools, right? And they're going to get a lot less of them are going to get paid because of that. So they should definitely be the ones figuring out who and how and why, and especially with how much money all that stuff is going to require, so like, and the rules in place for that. I think they should definitely get some say so, as well as the writers, because they're going to lose a ton of them too. But And these are the kind of stuff that I feel like a lot of people miss because they're too focused on culture wars. Speaking of Disney, you know, my little tribute to Star Wars in here, if anyone catches that. But this is from Caitlin Johnstone. We had a similar article from her last week, but this is slightly different bent. She writes, disrupt the culture wars. Keep breaking the spell and drawing attention to what's really going on, and you can stop out the abuse at its source. Okay? You with me so far, Care Bear?
Hey.
So, one of the great challenges faced by Westerners who oppose the political status quo today is the way the narrative managers of both mainstream factions continuously divert all political energy away from issues which threaten the interests of the powerful, like economic injustice, war, militarism, authoritarianism, corruption, capitalism, and ecocide, and towards issues which don't threaten the powerful at all, like abortion, racism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia. Okay? The method of social...
Actually, the way that she phrased... Hold on. Go back a second. I love how she phrased it here.
Uh-huh.
Like, any political energy that affects the powers that be. Those are the issues that we should be focusing on. So, versus the issues that the powers that be tell us that we should be focusing on that doesn't really affect them. You know, so...
Why I love
and
Caitlin.
especially right now, like... Right. So that, especially with what you mentioned at the bottom, that's been the focus, especially with, well, both parties. In various degrees, that's what they're focused on.
Yep.
And, you know, and even with some of our current political, sorry, not political, Democratic, not nominees, but candidates.
Yep.
Who are running to overtake Biden. Like, you can argue in various degrees, you know, RFK and Marianne suck at a lot of the top in terms of, in certain ways, but definitely like in terms of war in various degrees. They both suck in various areas of that, you know. So
yes, they do.
You know, like, and this is kind of like what I've had, not arguments, but discussions about online, especially with RFK, and that's why his capitulation towards Palestine, against Palestine, and basically being not even that. Let me take that back. He said he's a straight up capitalist.
Yep.
Straight up, he has said this. You know, and Marianne, in not so many words, has also said similar shit.
Yeah.
You know, none of them have an issue with it. They both think, oh, it can
They're
be
reformist, if anything.
Right. So it's like, if they're calling for reformists instead of, that's not going to threaten the establishment. That's what they do now.
Yep.
It's just a lot of tweaking, you know, but doesn't get to the root of actually fixing the problem. It's just a lot of tweaks. You know, that's why they're promoting. So that's why, right. So that's why for me, it's like for Marianne and RFK, no, it's an absolute no for me.
No.
For that reason. You know,
no.
But yeah, so it's the idea that people are still supporting them, actively knowing, or maybe just out of ignorance or putting their heads in the sand, that they have said, I don't oppose capitalism. Like, as someone on the left, that should be your opposition, the main one right there, as long as the other ones. But even online, I see a lot of people who are distracted with the cultural stuff, like more so like trans issues now. I think that's kind of the hot topic right now, as well as abortion a little bit. But, you know, I'd rather get to the imperialism of it all versus those other issues. Because, you know, if we get to imperialism, then I think everything else we can argue about, or it will kind of fall into place. You can't talk about, like, let's say, trans issues and not talk about the injustice in terms of healthcare, racism, you know, all those. Well, racism is kind of a part of it, but I can also argue racism is also tied to economics, especially in the West. So, so if we're not talking about the big issues, then we're not going to get anywhere.
Yep, I agree. Caitlin continues, the method of social control serves the powerful in some very obvious ways and is being used very effectively. As long as it remains effective, it will continue to be used. The worse things get, the more urgent the need to fight the class war will become. And the more urgent the need to fight the class war becomes, the more vitriolic and intense the artificial culture war will become in order to prevent political changes which inconvenience the powerful. This is 100% guaranteed. And what's tricky is that all the vitriolic intensity will create the illusion that the culture war has gotten more important when in reality, the class war has. It's just a straightforward fact that the more miserable, impoverished, and disempowered the public becomes, the more hateful and all-consuming the artificial culture war will be made to prevent revolution. That's what's been happening, and that's what will continue to happen. You can hate hearing it, and you can hate me for saying it, but it is a fact.
We don't.
I think we are pretty much know it's a fact. Yeah, we don't, Caitlin. We got you. So, what's to be done about this? Obviously, it's not an option to just throw disempowered groups to the wolves and ignore. Hey, why not? Why not, Caitlin? Let's round up some wolves, baby. I'm down. Like, those ones from Game of Thrones are around, right? So, and ignore the abuses they're suffering under the directed hatred coming after them from the right. And obviously, it's not an option to run to the other side of the artificial partisan divide and play along with the mainstream faction, which says we should focus only on culture war issues, as in Hillary Clinton famously arguing that breaking up the banks won't end racism and sexism. What? Huh? Like, she said what now?
The money is there. If we can save the banks, then we can save the world.
I mean, sounds like Greta, Hillary Clinton. As with most problems, the first step toward finding a solution is to bring consciousness to what's happening. Draw attention to the fact that marginalized groups are being used and abused by mainstream narrative managers to keep the public from turning their gaze on the abuses of their rulers. Draw attention to the way rightist narrative managers direct hatred towards marginalized groups to keep hatred away from our rulers, and to the way liberal narrative managers seize on that to direct their herd away from issues that can inconvenience the powerful and towards exclusive focus on the culture war. Okay? Stop.
Yep.
Stop letting people get sucked up into the performance and instead draw attention to what's really going on here. Act like a loud jerk at a movie theater who keeps yelling, "None of this is real." Those are actors on a movie set. Can you imagine how hard it would be to get lost in the narrative of a movie if somebody was constantly doing that to you? After a while, you'd stop seeing Oppenheimer and you'd only be able to see Cillian Murphy. Basically, all you're trying to do is take all the emotional heat that's being diverted into partisan feuding over issues whose outcomes will never inconvenience power in the slightest, and steer that emotional heat toward the people who are directing all this. This is both easy to do and completely honest, because how fucked up is it that they're doing this? How fucked up is it that the most influential voices in our society on both sides of the mainstream partisan divide are facilitating the abuse of marginalized groups in order to protect the powerful? It's about as loathsome a thing as you could possibly come up with. They're pitting human against human at the expense of society's most vulnerable members and watching them fight from on high like Greek gods. Can you think of anything more vile? What about you, Collin? Can you? You know?
Yes. Independent outlets that do this.
Yeah.
Because we're supposed to know better.
We're
and
supposed
we have plenty
to.
of colleagues on this space, and we have plenty of colleagues in the space that do this.
Yep.
So they do, and I think, and we talked about this. This is kind of like going back to the first segment. You know, the idea that we're not talking about Niger in terms of the economic ramifications of what not will just will happen, you know, in the global South, but how that will ultimately affect us in the West. That's
Yep.
the issue that we should be more talking about. Instead, what are we talking about? What was the hot topic today? You know, like,
Yep.
I can't even tell you because like I think I don't even know, but like at least today, but it's not that,
Mm-hmm.
you know. I think at best they're talking everyone's still talking about the
Marianne
brawl in
interview.
Alabama. The
And
Marianne interview, at least in this case, you know, like I know you guys are just coming up from Jimmy, you know,
Yep.
whatever else from that. And, you know, but it's like, again, for Marianne, it's like she's not attacking the establishment in the way that
No.
she makes herself to be. You know, if she
She's
says,
Cillian
as
Murphy
she
in
has,
this case.
oh, I don't have a problem with capitalism.
Yep.
Then that shouldn't be a person that you should be.
They're
She's not
extensions of the
serious.
same duopoly that is the problem to begin with. Like,
Right. That's just in a nicer package to make it a little more tasteful
yep.
to lefty audiences. That's
And I'll
it. Nothing more.
always draw attention to how disgusting what they're doing is. Draw attention to how deeply evil this behavior is. I'll keep shouting in that movie theater and drawing attention to what's really going on to highlight how profoundly depraved these monsters really are. Draw people's attention to this dynamic whenever you see it. When right-wing populists babble about LGBTQ conspiracies and shriek about wokeness, mock them for ridiculous sheep they are for playing into a dynamic that directly serves the elite power structures they claim to oppose. When liberals are ignoring economic injustice, war, militarism, authoritarianism, corruption, capitalism, and ecocide to focus on culture war battles whose outcomes will never even slightly inconvenience the powerful, highlight the disgusting way they themselves are feeding into a dynamic that imperils the marginalized communities they claim to defend. People on both sides of the divide will object to this message. The source of their objection is the exact programming I just described. The truth hides just beneath that objection. On some level, you all know this is happening. Keep breaking the spell and drawing attention to what's really going on, and you can stop out the abuse at its source. Great stuff from Caitlin. You know?
She's 2 for 2.
2 for 2.
To say like, not to say she doesn't write good articles, but the last two, this and last week's that you read from her, have been especially good.
And I think it's mainly both of them are like, focus up, idiots. Like,
right.
You know, you know, get your shit together.
Yeah. I think she's almost saying that knowing how people are seemingly
right,
like know better, and yet still are kind of playing into that spell again as we approach this upcoming election. That is almost like you've just straight up forgot the very things that they were telling me before I even started doing this. Like, and now like kind of capitulating to the things that they warned against.
Right.
So,
and we're just like,
snap out of it.
Right.
So
yeah, it's so it's just so a good reminder for us all. So
and I think part of that culture war is just politics itself right now. It's such a distraction for what it's capable of doing. And I'm looking at you right there, you. Stop paying attention to it. Not necessary. Not necessary.
Which is why I think, and this is for Reef and I, that's why very rarely, unless we have to, but if it relates to something
else more
important, we won't ever talk about those issues here. Not to say they're not important, but we want to try to elevate. And if other channels do it, that's on them. They can do it. It's their channels. But for us, it's like we don't want you guys to get so distracted that it takes away the conversation of what should really be important and what we really should mobilize about and what we really should put our full energy towards. Like, you know, it's fine to talk about abortion. I get the issue of abortion, but that is not any more important than if Black people in this country cannot afford health care, you
Yeah.
know, or if there
Anybody.
is a rape or something
Right.
that that a Black woman is not going to necessarily get the justice that she would need on account of that, or in certain states are forced to have that baby, you know, which is affecting of health, which is again effective of lack of health care. So you can't talk about any of these cultural issues without, if you're really serious, without talking about the economics behind any of them.
Mm-hmm.
And often not a lot of the people that tend to distract you do not avoid talking about the economic aspects of these issues.
Yep.
So economics should be the priority for everybody. And then everything else, you can make your case within that. But don't go into the don't fall for the traps of just talking about trans issues or abortion. You know, race, I think, is kind of, you know, like, but just focus on race without the actual terms of class that goes along with that, which, as we said, it's both.
Yeah,
I
it's
think, especially in
always comes down to
so,
class. You know?
right. So class issues, maybe that should be our focus.
I agree.
Anyway,
You know,
we are done.
that's it. That's it for us
So
tonight.
shout out to the people, I guess, who are coming in late. We highly recommend, if you guys are now just tuning in, please go back. I think a lot of you came in for like the latter half. Please go back and watch the first half where we talk about Niger and the situation in West
Papua New Guinea.
Papua New Guinea.
Yep.
Good stories, very important, very pertinent to
Lord, I apologize for all the starving pygmies in New Guinea.
Right.
Anyone get that
So,
reference?
right.
But
So
anyway,
you want to share?
Yes, I do.
You want to share? And then we have a surprise for you guys. If you want to stick around, we'll tell you. If you want to share our schedule for this week, Reef.
Yep. I am.
Want me to do it?
I got it. It's up. You can see it, right? Hopefully.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
I can.
We got tomorrow. Nobody wants to work anymore. Indian Snowhembo putting that together. That should be going out. They said it was real interesting. They found some possible feds on some of these businesses. So stay tuned for that. Friday, Angel in the Afternoon at 12:45 p.m. We have Tar Reed. Will probably be around 3 p.m. All of this Eastern, by the way. This is all in Eastern time.
Any word on that, Tara?
Not that I've heard of, but I stay tuned for our Twitter and we'll put that out. And then we'll rerun boats on Friday. If you missed them Sunday. Easy way to share that little segment with your friends. Bitch with Common Misty, Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern. That's always a good time. And then how do we miss that? Sunday, 10 o'clock. What do we got coming up Monday?
So Monday, potentially, unless we hear otherwise, Politically Homeless will be back on with Chris. He needed to take a little bit of a break, but he's saying that he's able to come back next week. So hopefully he and Crab will be able to do their show on Monday night at 10, or is it 9 o'clock? I forget.
I don't know.
We'll let you know. We'll guys let you know on Twitter.
Do they plan on doing that Monday?
They should, from what allegedly from what I'm hearing, yes.
Okay.
So, like I said, any changes, we'll let you know on Twitter. No American Tradition next week since Jesse was on yesterday. And then actually, so originally for this stream, we were going to have an interview with Miko Peled, who is an Israeli activist.
We might be able to do that live
actually based
Monday.
So he was actually supposed to do that interview live tonight, but he said at the last minute that he wasn't able to due to a commitment. So we are actually going to do that interview pre-recorded on Monday. So our guess is we'll probably be able to premiere on Tuesday, I guess. So we'll let you guys know for sure.
We might be able to do it live Monday, because we're doing it early, right?
Yeah,
So,
I'll talk to you about it after. But we'll
cool.
see. But if you want to turn to the next slide, because I actually did make a thumbnail for that.
Cool.
So we are going to talk about Israel and
does not equal democracy.
Yeah, and also, given that Miko is Israeli, but very much against anti-Zionism and all of that, just having some conversations regarding, I think, just a lot of questions. We definitely want to ask him more from his perspective, what that is, especially since he has been to Palestine and has done a lot of work there. Also, let us know in Twitter if there's any particular, actually, we probably should ask this, if there's any particular questions that you want us to ask him when we do talk to him on Monday. So yeah, we'll let you know if we make it live, or I think, though, he did say he would prefer pre-recorded, though. So
sure, whatever.
But if we do pre-record, then we'll probably be able to premiere it on Tuesday again.
But yeah, whatever. We'll figure it out. So, but she also said she'd reach out to some actual Palestinians as well for us to have on the show. So keep an eye on that. I'll make sure to follow up with Fee on that.
Please, Fee, come on.
So we should get that done. But otherwise, that's us out. Care Bear thing.
Yeah.
So, as always, make sure to.
So please, whatever.
Subscribe and like the stream. We appreciate your support.
Which you guys have been doing. You guys have been subbing like crazy, so that's actually helped with our analytics. So please continue doing that. But at least comment on videos, share out clips, tell everybody about us. We are trying to be more regular in terms of trying to get on other shows. Other channels to, for various things. We're also talking about, the future. We're heading in the fall, we're heading on our 2-year anniversary. So looking for ways to grow the network, hopefully get more people involved in INN to get different voices here. And I think for us, just trying to get, different voices that are not necessarily heard from in the space often, that we're able to try to interview or at least have regular appearances for you guys to hear different perspectives. So trust us, we are working on that, but because we're small, we're not necessarily viable for.
And I'll give another shout out to our members on both YouTube and Patreon. You'll find your names down in that little ticker going across the screen right there. So appreciate you. If you want to find out ways to support us, like those nice fam down there, you can go down in the description below, head to indienews.network, and find ways to support us there. Or click the little membership, hit subscribe. It's all down there. You know where the buttons are. I'm gonna tell you, you're smart boys and girls and theys and thems and says and sirs. But anyway, I think that's it. Anything we're missing? I don't think so.
We got everything. So
cool. Remember, kids, labels are bad. Wait. This one. Labels are bad.
Yes.
Stay independent. Good night, fam.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Bye, have a great time.